just on this particular project?
No, I'm just talking across our CapEx generally. Across our projects.
So as we've mentioned with our annual plan, looking at that and our LTP, we have built in some inflation. Every project does have a contingency. So you are absolutely right there. Some of that contingency, depending on the nature of the project. So remember, we have got multi-year projects that go out 7-8 years in some cases, and we haven't seen some of those big costs coming through. Other ones were in the middle of construction. So we have got a range of different things that are going on, but inflation isn't the only pressure that we've got. We've got lots of global pressures and things and disruption, and that's just part of the environment that we're currently living in and what we need to cope with. I mean, there's a lot of economic updates and commentators about that. All the global banks are actually working to try and change their monetary policy to bring that down. So, you know, the Reserve Bank has a responsibility to try and pull that back down under 3%. Yes, it is currently out on that spike. They were originally saying they're going to write it within 1 year. That's what we were told 6 months ago first, and then it went to a year. And yesterday I was listening to a commentator that said it'd be more like 18 months, 2 years till we actually come back down into that spectrum. But they certainly don't believe the OCR and other things are going to go up too much, you know, higher than what's forecasted at the moment.
Okay. The supplementary, Mr. Chairman, if I may. So summing that up, is it fair to say that we're well aware of these risks? We're coping with them and managing them as best we can within the proposals themselves? Is that where we sit at the moment? There's no significant risk emerging, I guess.
At this stage, I think where we're managing our risks, we have got risks identified within each project.
Yeah.
And at a project level, we have those risks identified, and those risks, the significant ones, do get talked about at our portfolio governance group meetings. So we do discuss them, we do look at them, and as we're hearing things like steel is just popping and rising, and it's about also the project manager saying, well, is there an alternative if I've got it? And it depends on where we are with the projects, you know, like some of them, the multi-sport, we haven't really started, but, you know, as we go through, we might have to rescope works as we go through. So I imagine as we go into, you know, in the next 8 months, we start looking ahead and doing the next annual plan, we'll have to come back and revisit it, and we'll be in a different space and a different time and a different cycle for the economy as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Jordan, sorry, Acting Mayor Jordan.
No, the question was whether we're going to methodically work through them.
Thank you. Councillor Carlson.
My question is for about the city strategy, so I'll hold until we get there.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Page 12, where you've got the summary of the activities and projects and what colour they are. Down the bottom, Transportation Network Efficiency Program. I was just intrigued by a word I've never seen before in the English language called signalisation. What does that mean?
Traffic lights. Putting signals in, Councillor.
I'd like an official response. Signalisation.
You're more like Mr. Wilson every day. Right, moving right along. Just before you move on, can I have another crack through you, Mr. Chair, at answering Councillor Clinton Goddard's question, because I could tell by the look on her face she wasn't entirely convinced by my answer. So I'm trying to think back to the steering group meeting we had a couple of weeks ago, Councillor, and there are a couple of elements to the billing. So remember that the idea of mock billing was to achieve several objectives. The first one was to educate. It's a soft start to educate people about something they've been quite apprehensive about. We saw that through the consultation and the LTP. So it was a soft start to show them essentially how much they're using. And we've seen that with their in-house trial, which a number of the people in this chamber are currently on, that can be very, very effective. Just sending people a regular bill, if you like, or a note about their consumption. The second part, and the more complex and far more difficult part that Council asked us to look at, was the creation of a tariff structure that achieved a number of other objectives. That's the bit we're looking at holding off on. So when I talk about mock billing, we're still talking about sending people an account, we may ascribe a value to it, so it has some meaning to them. But it's essentially an education tool around consumption until we see what the new entity is going to do. And by the time we get all the meters in and do that for a year, we'll actually be very clear about what entity B is going to do in the space. So that there's a huge amount of work in the tariff construction, particularly in the way we take account of large households, low income households, all those elements. That's the bit we're putting a small delay on. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, I guess. Yeah, my concern was around one of the real concerns around the council table when we discussed universal water rate meterings, because it's one of the concerns of our community, is making sure that our more vulnerable or low income households and members of our community are looked after and made sure that we're not in a situation where they're in a position of water poverty. And just, I guess, understanding that the part of the delay perhaps, but I guess wanting some reassurance or some direction of how we can continue to make sure that their interests are looked after by perhaps setting up a tariff structure now, so that the structure is then handed over to entity B, or advocating. Yeah,
and through you, Chair, I think the answer to that is, at best, we're likely to have some influence, we hope, on the entity B's tariff structures. But at this stage, we don't know. The transition unit's not far enough through its planning to be able to tell us that. So I guess we're trying to buy some time to find out what they're going to do versus what we can do.
Okay.
Councillor Bublitz.
Sorry, mate. Oh, I mean, through you, Chair. Is there a chance that entity B might end up setting the tariff structures if we don't?
Absolutely. Hence, some of the thinking is all that work we could do could be in vain. So we're actually trying to get a better steer from entity B transition unit and the national transition unit on how this might work. It's just too early to say at this stage.
Okay. While we're doing water, are there any further questions on the water projects? The list on table 1 gives us the first several of water. So
I had one about the thermal
Councillor
dryer.
Clinton goes.
It states here that there's been delays with the detailed design step of the thermal drying equipment. I just wondered why that delay was and whether it's impacting the funding from the Crown at all.
I can cover that if you like, Kimberly. I'm the co-sponsor on that one as well, thanks to Mr. Langford's departure. So the thermal dry facility replacement project is made up of a number of elements. There's site works, there's civil works, there's the dryer itself and some other ancillary stuff. So the site works are going really well. The contract's been let, it's, the prep's underway. The delay is on the design of the thermal dryer itself. And we're using a German firm called Haslev. You might have heard us talk about that before. So there's Haslev International, which has its head office in Germany, and Haslev New Zealand. The delay has actually been with Haslev New Zealand. So what the project managers and our consultants have done is gone back to Germany and said, can we please get this hurried along? I mean, we should have signed the contract a month ago. I'm still waiting to sign it now. Our project manager who's on this one assures me we'll get it done before 30 June. We want to do that because it'll help those of you who've got a CapEx suite, it'll help considerably bump that number along. It's about $5 million upfront payment. So, yep, this means there's delays. But overall, if you look at the entire end-to-end life cycle of that project, it's not outside that at the moment. There's just one element of it has been delayed. That's what this is referring to.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further on water, wastewater, 3 water?
We're seeing we're jumping around a bit. So
No, we're
the
fine.
Mountain Road reservoirs. Yep. So I see the budget was 19.94 million. Did we come in budget, in scope and in budget?
Good question.
Through you, Chair, there's already been a report back on this. As I recall, Deputy Mayor, Mr. Langford provided that before he went, and certainly that report indicated that we did deliver on budget.
It did, but I mean, we still haven't actually signed it off from the strategic project yet, so
Correct.
can't be completely finalised.
Yeah, it's showing it. Yep, it's showing, Mr. Chair, at 85%, and I queried that myself the other day, and that's really just around final testing and handover. I mean, the reservoirs are running; they've been in service for some time. When we had the ribbon cutting, they'd actually been operating for some weeks at that time. So There is some minor back end. I couldn't see how it was 85, but I'm not going to argue with the PMs. That's their job.
No, that doesn't really answer, sorry, it doesn't really answer my question. The budget 19.94, did we come in on budget?
According to the report that Mr. Langford produced several months ago, yes, we did.
Why is it still here?
It's been quite tidied all the nuts and bolts up yet.
So we're just going through the project closeout
Yes.
section, which also is an exercise around benefits realisation to make sure we have realised the benefits of the project. So there's probably that little bit of, debrief type work on how it went and have we got the benefits we wanted.
Can I suggest, Mr. Chairman, that when we do this in our next strategic projects, that we actually have the other column, the contrary column that tells how we're going against budget, or when the project is finalised and completed, that it was either within budget, with that budget, out of budget, and whether there's a change in scope.
Okay. That will be readily able to be done, I imagine.
Mr. Chair, we have got some other improvements we're looking at for this report in the next round as well. So we'll look at building that in, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Handley first. and then Tony. Yep.
Just picking up on that point, benefits realisation is a part of a project scope, and I'm pleased to hear you saying that that's proceeding. Will they come to council, because that will answer the question of the deputy mayor, the acting mayor? Sorry.
Yeah, I think we did discuss whether we could bring a report on the reservoirs to you, like just to cover off on the whole project. So that could be one that we could bring maybe next time around a deep dive. We discussed that.
Yeah.
A deep dive into that project as a whole once it's completed, just to make sure we could definitely bring that up.
Yeah, well, benefit realisation is all about, so we finished the project, how did we go, what did we learn from it? That's all good for us to hear, I think. But my question was actually a slightly more strategic one. Given that the legislation around Three Waters is likely, and we can anticipate it perhaps being successful, so within 12 months, the people making decisions may be someone else. And I'm just wondering, are there any decisions that we need to really think about getting done over the next 6 or 12 months before other people start making them for us?
Mr. Chair, my response to that would be that thinking went into your current LTP. You remember that year one was hugely weighted, I think, with carryovers with $94 million or something CapEx. David and his team spent a huge amount of time considering exactly what the most important projects we needed to load into years 1, 2, and 3 up to the 2024 handover. And those remain. A couple of things have been brought forward since. A couple of things were altered at deliberations on the 19th of May last year by council, obviously, and that's your prerogative. But that thinking's already been done. I'm not aware, unless the team are, of anything else that's emerged in the last 12 months that would change that plan.
Keep an eye on it though.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. Just in regard to the Urunurio sewer system, in regard to the land purchase, one of our fellow colleagues, he doesn't sit at this table, has been promoting on social media that there's been zero consultation and that officers have withheld vital information from elected members. Could you tell me if there's any truth in that, please? And you can make it as short as you want.
I don't think there's any truth in that.
Can I answer that one? Mr.
You
Chair?
may if you wish, but we already got there is none.
Exactly. Just to remind you, that was one of the projects that was accelerated by council on the 19th of May at the deliberations meeting. Originally, it was scheduled for years 6 and 7 or something like that. It was brought forward because there was significant community appetite for it and enthusiasm for it. It was brought forward to, I think, year 4. And at the time, the advice to you was that will limit our opportunity to do proper design, planning and options analysis. I remember Mr. Langford standing there saying, don't beat me up later on if we fast track some of this and then there are some questions. This is the first of those questions. The land that presents itself to start a project like this doesn't come along very often. So yep, we moved really fast and we did minimum amount of consultation with anyone. There was no intent to withhold. There never is. You know how we operate. However, we had to move fast. So that transaction will turbocharge that plan exactly in the way you asked for last year. So I think it's actually a very successful outcome. If anyone feels out of the loop, I apologise on my team's behalf, but actually we pulled off a bit of a coup there.
Mr. Chair, can I supplement to that? in light of what you've just said in the responses, if a councillor has been on social media stating that officers deliberately withheld information from the council, would that constitute a code of conduct breach to you?
It could, is the answer, councillor, without looking at, I haven't seen the post, I haven't seen the way it's worded, but I'm happy to have a look at that because it certainly could. The code of conduct clearly states that elected members should avoid criticising officers in public, and if that's what's happened, then technically, yes, that could be a code of conduct.
Thank you.
I think that's not a helpful direction for this committee to examine right now. If necessary, that can be done at a separate venue later.
I thought while I was here and everyone was here, why not? In and out.
The question was asked and answered that this is completely not true, the allegation that was made. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. It's universal water metering. So, and again, we have a budget and we've been told over a period of time that we've actually, the performance against budget has been really good. And we've actually made some savings, but we don't, I'm disappointed that we can't actually see very much. It is too brief, well, for my liking anyway, that we get a report on a $15 million project, which is underway. And we know what the scope is, we know what we're requiring, what we're trying to achieve. And we just see the budget and we know anecdotally that we are making savings, but we don't know what those savings are. And so I've got 2 paragraphs in front of me that tell me minimal.
Could you refer to
Sorry.
those
12
paragraphs,
and
please?
13.
12 and 13.
Thank you.
Ms. Buckingham.
Through you, Chair, I'd just like to highlight that when we compare our projects against our annual plan and what we set in the plan, we will be going through the finance audit and risk that is coming up soon to look at the current year and how we're progressing against the budget we set for the year, which does itemise these strategic projects and how we're tracking for this financial year. Appreciate it's not the whole time, but it'll give you a sense of our progress on the way through each one of those projects.
Yeah.
That doesn't help me when I see the first budget, but I don't see the anecdotal savings, supposed savings as we're progressing. So I'd also like to see when they're doing overruns as well, because this committee that I would suggest that is its job, along with audit and risk. But audit and risk is more that when the job's done, how did we go? What did we? I was going to say lessons and learnings, but I'd get shot, so I won't bother. But, yeah.
He's away.
Yeah. Can I make a comment? There's a way. Not with my small vocabulary, Councillor Clinton Gottis.
Signalisation.
There's hope. We're in your hands.
I did get a bit of an update on the team. And one thing to just realise is that for the installation phase, we are only at the very start of that, and we're currently conducting the pilot. So we haven't finalised the contract cost for the installation of meters yet. So our proposed contractors have provided us with proposals and estimated costs, and they're testing that through the pilot. And then once we have a preferred contractor, there will be some negotiating and we will have a better steer on how much that particular part of the contract will cost us once we have finalised that contract. So it's probably a bit early to say.
Thank you. The CEO would like
Just
to add something.
Just to add to Ms. Hope's answer there, Councillor Jordan, there were some savings on procurement of the meters, and that's been previously reported to the council. And Mr. Barron sitting back there, he'll probably tell us exactly what that was. I remember Mr. Langford was quite delighted about it at the time, because it was one of the wins we got from getting on to ordering these early. However, there's a trade-off here, and I'll raise this now because it probably applies to the whole report, between time and effort, cost and benefit, whatever you want to call it. There's 24 pages of projects here. We're trying to present a reasonably brief update. It's not a full report on each project that appears. I mean, that's going to take a huge amount of officer time if we want to expand it. So if the report's not meeting your needs, I'm very happy to hear how we could do that. But just bear in mind, the more time we have our officers reporting back on this stuff, the less time they're actually doing the work. So there's a real trade-off in it.
And in that regard, we are on the third project on our list. Thermal dryer, anything further to add? Anyone with further questions? Right, moving right along.
No, can I make a comment? then? Chair, then we have the contra with the thermal dryer where we appear that we may be heading for overruns anecdotally.
At this point, I think the comment is that we are delayed, but not heading for cost overruns. Is that how I understand it, Ms. Hope?
I think the main area that would be yellow in this one is the timing delays.
Yeah, that's largely correct. We are seeing, as Kimberly mentioned before, the rising steel prices. That will have an impact on this project because it is largely steel. So there are potential cost issues there. We have looked at maximising the DIA funding as well for this particular project, and also looking at other budgets as well.
So to condense that down, not only are we looking at a time delay, but we are potentially looking, as the Deputy Mayor said, at a cost increase as time goes on, but there may be alternate funding for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just have a
Councillor
supplement on that,
Barbaras.
please? The thermal dryer, I believe 6 million was set aside for contingency of that 45. So the project was actually 38. So what you're saying is we're going to be using the 45 and then we need more.
We're going to be using that contingency, yes.
Okay. So we may have a cost overrun, but not above what was originally allowed for at this point.
At this point, but with the cost we're getting back through, we'll have to come back. We'll know more in a few months' time. We've got the two contracts. We've got the equipment contract and we've got the main works contract. So we still need to finalise the cost on the main works contract.
Okay.
Come August, September, we'll be in a much better position in terms of where that project's heading.
Rightio. Thank you.
Just further on that though, Mr. Chairman, it would be inappropriate of me not to point, I'll be failing my duty if I didn't point out that we're not guaranteeing we will hit budget on every one of these projects in front of you. There are contingencies built in. We're seeing unprecedented inflation. We don't know if it's a spike or a trend. I wouldn't sit here and say that we will bring all these in on budget. We won't. There will definitely be some overruns like there always have been on every other project. You know, we've got a much more robust project methodology now, but that doesn't guarantee that we can all 100% of the time present a project or complete a project for what's on the paper in front of you right now, a budget that was set 12 months ago.
Okay. Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. It must be extremely difficult working out whether you're going to have cost overruns or whatever when the design hasn't even been completed. Once it is completed, will that give you greater accuracy in projecting cost?
Chair, yeah, obviously, as you move through and you know more, then yes, you do get much better accuracy on the final costs. There's always risks involved in terms of the contract itself. You don't transfer all the risk onto the suppliers. The risk is kept with the party best able to manage it. But yeah, once you've got the detailed design, you've got a much better plus or minus 10% of where you're going to finish off. Point to make is you don't actually know what it's going to cost until you've actually finished everything and paid all the final bills.
Thank you.
Acting Mayor.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, but I'm not trying to be pedantic, but we had a project of 38 million, which we had funding for from external sources. We had a contingency. The contingency, as far as I'm aware, is all but used up. It allowed for probably going to be all used up with the extreme probability that will still not be sufficient to do the job. So I think we do have to be aware of what we're doing and where if there is overruns, because once we're that far down this project, we're committed. So it's not as though we can say that we're not going to do it anymore. We are doing it. And so we do, as a council, have to be aware of what we're doing about our capital expenditure, because in the future, that also has a bearing on our operational expenditure, because if you spend more capital, your operational expenditure goes up. So that does affect what's remains in our 8 years of our LTP, about our rate profile. So you do have to be aware of it, and you do have to watch it carefully. Otherwise, next year it just shows up and they say, well, actually, you knew about that last year. Well, we do know about it. So we should take full note of it, and that's our job.
Okay, thank you. Very good debate. We were in the question phase.
It's
but-
not debate, Mr. Chairman.
Do you agree?
Oh, I think I could make a pretty good debate out of that, but there you go. Councillor Bubbles.
Sorry, I'm along the same lines, I'm afraid, but this is a question. Part of the thermal dryer rebuild was that we are working on or replacing buildings. If the thermal dryer is our main concern, has there been any thought about changing the scope or not doing the buildings so we can still fall in under budget?
Yes, there has. There has indeed. When the original project estimates came in on the civil works, which included the admin building and stuff, I think I've got that contract right. Andrew will kick me afterwards if I haven't. And it looked like it was higher than what was originally estimated for. They were sent back to rework it. So, yep. But remember, the thermal dryer is the main element of this thing, but it's not the only thing. And at the time, officers bundled up a bunch of other stuff because there was government money available, and they did a bloody good job of securing some of that. So the 37 million came out of central government. There was 6 million contingency / of our money, which included some other things, they wouldn't fund. And now it's been inflation adjusted to the 43 became 45 that appears in front of you. So, yep, we're continually looking at design, as Ms. Hope's already alluded to, materials, scope change to try and contain things. And just to come back to the acting mayor's comment, it's not like we're not keeping an eye on this or trying to hide anything. As soon as we know, you'll know. But at this stage, it's too early to say. It's looking like we're going to be fully expended on that budget of 45 million, Councillor Jordan. But I can't tell you the exact details yet because there's still too much to come in.
Right. Have we exhausted that? Shall we move along? Waitara stormwater questions, comments, issues? No.
Am I being pedantic? Yeah. I would ask, when we did the budget, how much did we allow for purchasing land?
I would have to get back to you on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can't remember. As the recently installed co-sponsor of that one, what I can tell you is that the original budget that went into the long-term plan was done in accordance with the initial business case, the IBC that Waka Kotahi required. So there were some figures that were best estimates at the time. They weren't the category 3s that we look to have in the plan for a project that large. What we're working on now is the detailed business case, or the DBC as it's known, and now we're getting a much better idea of the costs that are coming out of that. I think it's fair to say it would be very fair to say the land that's currently suggested we purchase is higher both in quantity and cost than what was put into that IBC.
Anything further on Waitara stormwater, Waitara trunk wastewater upgrades? I think. Okay, moving along. Integrated transport plan. Waka Kotahi and council obviously work together, and also with the regional council on transport issues. This is the first major plan on transportation for forever, probably. And it's providing a much more strategic look at how we are going forward on transport. Do you want to give us some detail on that?
I think I'll
Kimberly?
defer to Juliet actually on that.
Through you, the chair, the plans is at its very early stages, I would say that, where we've got the steering group now set up, and we're working quite closely with Waka Kotahi to get that scope in place, and so we can update that strategic business case, which the last time we did that was 2016. So that's really where we are.
In the network plan that was done some time ago, there were a number of nodes, a couple of which spring to mind. I think the most critical one was probably Mangere Road, Northgate intersection. Another critical one would maybe be Elliott Street, what's it called? Courtney Street intersection, and a number of others, some of which are starting to become a real problem. The top of Coronation Avenue where it joins Cumberland Street, etc. So there are a number of these that are becoming quite quickly a problem. Do we have a plan of how to deal with those prior to the major developments, which may be 5 or more years away?
Through you, the chair, I would benefit from having the manager transportation here to talk to some of the specifics. However, I do know that some of those, that network operating plan did pull in some of those projects that needed to be dealt with quickly into the long-term plan. So there is that funding in that list of projects sitting there. And some of those issues, particularly with our partners, Waka Kotahi, will be considered through the integrated transport plan. So that will definitely have an influence on finding solutions to some of those issues.
One or two of them are our own, as in Waka Kotahi is not involved. And one in particular that I regularly get complaints about is Carrington, Huatoki, Horry Street, which is just like a festering sore, to be honest. And I'm not sure when we're going to admit defeat and say, this is not working as it was intended, let's redo it. Do we have any plans in that regard?
So I'd need to defer that question and come back to you on that in terms of that detail. Not an identified project in the LTP, so it will come in the thinking for the integrated transport plan.
Yeah.
But that's as far as I can go at this stage.
Although it's not an identified project, it's a project that's had already quite a lot of money spent on it in annual plan cycles. And it's been temporarily stopped and fixed. And that particular intersection, I mean, if I was standing for mayor, I'd have a lot of fun with it.
Mr. Chairman, I might be able to add something. I've been there with council engineers, and I've worked with the transportation manager. I understand there's an external group being contracted to finalize the design or a redesign of that area, and that's expected within the next month or two. And you're quite right. It is a real difficulty for the locals. Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Bennett, did you want to ask a question on that?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yeah, look, I was pleased that you brought up festering sores, which leads me into a question for you, Juliet. Within the integrated.
That was
yeah, sorry.
More than adequately tough.
With much love. The integrated transportation plan, can we just have a bit of a heads up around the district plan and where the potential bypass road going from Colson through to Bishop through to Henwood? Can we just have a confirmation that that's actually in the district plan and some sort of time frame when we might expect to see that?
Yes, through the chair. So there's two elements to that. You refer to the district plan. So it is an indicative road that's being put in the proposed district plan. And that's going through the hearings process, as you know, at the moment, with a decision expected either later this year or early next year. And then the second element is there is funding in the LTP for a strategic business case or a business case process over that link. So that is also progressing through the transportation team's work program.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, anything further on transport? Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Given all the issues that you've heard being brought up, have you any plans for increased signalisation?
Absolutely.
Oh, God.
Took up a David Street. Where else?
Oh, Devon. Mr. Tim?
Candide.
Public transport, I mean, there's a lot of interest in public transport and it's been suggested that somehow council become closely involved in that. What's the plan over the next few years for public transport?
I think the first point is this plan is obviously an opportunity to work with our other partners in the region. So we will be working closely with the regional council to have those discussions around the public transport network and how that can deliver on some of the strategic outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So I think it's a really good platform to have a good conversation around that.
And next week is the regional council's transport committee meeting, so I will be representing us there. Right, anything further on transport? Walkway extension, come on, Colin.
Thank you. It would be remiss of me not to bring that up, wouldn't it? But anyway, look, I'm happy with most of the progress, but I'd love that project to be into the green and not into the yellow. But I know that officers are working really hard on it. My question is to Juliet, because she's still there, is that the business case is in the final stages, is what you say in the report here. Could you just bring the councillors and myself up to date with that business case? And if it can be possible to be brought forward from August to bring it in further so that it can get to there, because we have been told that it was going to be in February, it was going to be in March, then it went to April, and now in this report it's into August. So could you just tell us why that is delayed?
Yeah, sure. So I'm through the chair. Effectively, we're probably at quite a delicate stage at the business case where we are confirming a lot of elements. So there's a lot of co-design involved in that and a lot of meetings with the relevant parties in the hapu to work through the various stages. So in that regard, with that time is required to get that right so that we can put forward the business case with confidence and with all the parties on board.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Jordan. Deputy Mayor.
When we work up the business case,
Debate.
when we're working up a business case, do we work to that budget, or do we just work to a business case? Has it got a lot more flexibility than that? It's got a budget of 25 million.
So through the chair, the business case reflects the desires of the partners, but obviously there are considerations to the budget that need to come through that, which are being discussed.
Okay, anything further? Moving on.
I think, Mr. Chair, it's probably fair to say my view of this project, given its complexity and the approach we're taking, the very careful approach that's been taken over 12 to 18 months now, co-design with our tangata whenua partners, Waka Kotahi involved and so on. This is likely to stay in yellow for some time, Councillor. I would love to be able to tell you we can fast track this. We can't. I think it's going to go slower, not faster, based on what I've seen in my first 2 steering group meetings.
Just in answer to that then, I thought that the steering groups were all happy with it and everything, is what I've been led to believe. So,
when you say the steering group's all happy with it, where the rubber hits the road is what it's going to cost. And it comes back to the acting mayor's comment about, are we working to the budget? So what we have assembled now is a full collection of everyone's aspirations and desires and wants. Costing those out is the next bit, and that's where things will get difficult.
hope not.
Councillor Bevan.
Thank you. I hear what you're saying and fully understand it. I'd like to know the feeling from the working group, though, that all very happy in the co-design. Do you feel they have the appetite to stick to budget as well?
I don't think, Mr. Chair, that's something we could probably answer in an open meeting right now. It wouldn't probably be helpful. I'm happy to take it up afterwards offline with you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Interesting, an interesting position to be in. as a committee responsible for our projects, does seem to me that we should be able to get some, at least indication.
The short answer is I don't know. We haven't had that discussion at the steering group level yet.
Okay, that's fair. Rightio. Moving along, anything more on transport? It's interesting that the Inglewood raised pedestrian crossing is in place, finished, I believe finished, signalized and working apparently. But I fear there might be a question or two.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is some concerns out there. Have you heard about those concerns and about the raised platform being quite high and the speed that the vehicles are travelling over?
Yeah, I think we have heard some concerns about that. I think probably, I mean, the outcomes that we want to get is slowing cars down. So that's what the raised platform is designed to do. So it is around safety. What we're probably seeing is just that it's a change for the community and something that maybe we should monitor over the next month or so and then see how the community responds after that. I think it is probably achieving what it's set out to achieve, and the community will start to embrace that soon, hopefully.
I'll ask a supplementary on that if I may. Given that it's Waka Kotahi's highway and road, are they doing speed monitoring by way of speed measuring tubes across the road there at all?
I'm not sure, but I would definitely think that is something that is planned as part of any kind of improvement that we do in that space.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Roberts.
I'd just like to make the comment. I drove past there the other day and there was a police officer there and it slowed me down and I was well under the speed limit, so it is doing its job.
Of 25k. 25k.
Okay, further things on transport, anything? Right, moving along. Do note that the Kaitaki Trail to Ruhihi Werapini is got a red flag against it. We've got a long-term negotiation, I guess, going on there, or a discussion. Do you want to enlighten us a little on that?
Delighted to, Mr. Chair. My understanding is we've got a standoff, is how I would describe it. The hapu involved have consistently said, and you're well aware of this from previous report backs, that they don't want to see cycling on the Monga. It's going through a process of, being, I'm trying to think of the right word, endowed with personal status, a bit like the Wanganui River, that mountain. So it's going to become more sacred, not less, in short. So they don't see cycling as compatible with that. They're kind of happy with walking. So we went back to the regional council as the funder of the CapEx, even though a bit of it falls on us as well, and said, are you happy with walking only for the money you're putting in, which is $3.5 million? And I heard last week they are not happy with that. So they said it's got to be cycling and walking, or the money isn't available. So that's what I would call a Mexican standoff.
Probably another analogy might be loudhailer diplomacy, I suspect, but obviously some negotiation and discussion is going to have to take place over a longer period. Is this something that we should simply park for a time, or how should we handle it?
Well, the reality is, councillors, there's no way we can proceed in the current environment. It will need to sit down with all the parties around the table and see if we can, as you say, come to some kind of compromise or negotiate an outcome. But at the moment, it's read for good reason.
Okay. Yes, Councillor
All the
Hitchcock.
trails are linked with transport, so ask it now.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
The Taranaki Traverse land acquisition, sorry, I've probably asked this prior. It's green. Have we identified all the pockets of land we need to purchase or are we still waiting on some, and aware of land prices going up? And because I know we're probably looking to purchase over a time frame, like we're not, just some commentary about that.
Through you, the chair. So we've done some desktop work, mainly across the whole network, but have done some ground truthing as well in the urban area in particular. So that's given us a good start. Before we go into an acquisition process, then we'd need to look at a wider strategy as how we approach that. So in the interim, we're really looking at opportunities when they do come up through subdivision development, etc. So that's that next stage, is really to get into that acquisition strategy. Now we have a better understanding of the potential.
One other question. I'm not sure if we know this yet. Is it going to be a alternative transport corridor or just a trail, as that will determine level of land we need to purchase and actual cost of trail? Yeah.
Correct. And that's a very good question. And that's the importance of working very closely with Ngāti Tāwherikura and Hapu and Iwi in the area to get that scope determined very early. So that process is happening alongside the actual detail of looking at the land.
Yeah. Sorry, just to, because I guess with active transport like Waka Kotahi, if we want their funding, but that then comes with a whole, like their business case model.
Yep.
Rather than just a trail that is a access way to the.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, no clear assumptions have been made at this stage. It's an open discussion to determine what the scope is. And for example, there may be areas that are not appropriate. There may be areas that are. So that's what we can work out when we go through the business case process.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further on transport, trails? Nope. Right. We're back in what was your world, Ms. Hope. We're into commercial and industrial MRF, landfills, refuse, recycling, etc. Questions? Well, first, let me start off on the MRF. We're well underway with that. Is the final design, as is now about to be built or being built, big enough?
Yes, it's definitely big enough. So we've kind of designed it on what we think the kind of maximum volume will be, which is about 20 to 25,000 tonnes of waste being sorted in the facility. We probably won't get that first up, but definitely we should be able to capture that kind of maximum volume in the facility.
Okay. The Ministry for the Environment is partly funding us, and you're due to make a report shortly or already. Is that good news for us?
Well, it means that we get our first piece of funding. So yes, I've submitted the first milestone report this month. It is only a small amount. It's just because it's just the design and procurement kind of side of the construction. The next milestone report will be at the end of the construction phase, and that's when we'll get the bulk of the funding.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clinton-Gotis.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions for me on this as well. So in relation to the Ministry for the Environment funding, the delay doesn't put any of that in jeopardy at all, or put extra pressure on the deadlines?
We have been speaking with the Ministry about the project delays. So we have had to amend our deed with them just on the timing of the milestones, and we will probably need to update that timing again once we start construction, because we'll have much more firm timeline on how long that construction is and when the facility will actually be open at that time. So we're just working through that at the moment.
But they've been reasonably understanding about the
Yes.
delays and the reasons for them?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And the second question I had in paragraph 43, it says that the tender for operating the facility will have a collaborative approach, focus on broader outcomes, including social and economic benefits. Just wondered, does that mean we're taking a social procurement kind of approach to this project?
Yes, absolutely. So some of the outcomes that we're looking for is around employment, and also around generating new local markets for some of the products that we're sorting. So hopefully generating a bit of business, collaborating with organisations that might be able to do the processing or the end market recycling for us locally. So that's definitely one of the core outcomes of the project.
Okay, great to hear. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
The waste
Councillor Hammond.
minimisation fund, now that's changing and presumably going to increase quite significantly over future years. So what rules will apply in the future and what would our intention be in accessing those funds?
For this project or just generally?
Generally,
Yeah, so with the waste levy per ton of waste that goes into landfill increasing, there's definitely going to be an increase in funding at the national level through the contestable fund, and also what we get as councils, we're already getting extra revenue for locally. So the Ministry for the Environment have been reviewing the funding criteria and have changed or updated how they will allocate funding. And the next funding round is open in October, so we'll get a bit more transparency about their new way of funding, but it should make it easier for everyone to access the money that is available. But it will be focused on, you know, the national infrastructure plan and particular focus areas that will help us get to our circular economy goals and also the climate reduction. Emissions
okay,
reduction
just a
plan.
supplementary, if I may, could we just unpick that a little more? You say it'll be directed at the National Infrastructure Project, of which the biggest one is Three Waters, of course. Is it going?
No, the waste minimisation, sorry,
Okay.
waste minimisation projects.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
In the few months towards the end of last year, we had some issues in regard to coastal erosion and old landfills that were, in some cases, decades closed. Where are we at? We have a little report here in paragraphs 46 and 47. But where are we at in establishing some sort of permanent solution to those, I'll call them vintage landfills?
So we have completed the initial risk assessment of all at-risk landfills or historic landfills that may get some erosion either from being beside a stream or beside the coast. So the main outcome of that is that most of them are not at risk at the moment, and the ones that are 3 landfills in Waitara. Those are the ones that are taking a little bit more time to do some scoping on, because we have been consulting with the hapu there to see what their preference would be. And one of the options would be complete removal of, say, the one at Batterscombe Terrace. So to be able to cost that out, we really need to know the extent of that. And so we are currently doing a bit of exploratory work, like drilling. We want to do some drilling just to determine the extent, to see whether it would be feasible to take part or all of that landfill away. The thing that is delaying that process is that we do need some resource consents to do that from just a historic site perspective. And we are consulting with the hapu on that stage. So it's just making those applications and getting that so we can do that exploratory work, and then we'll have a better idea of what the cost would be and what the options would be for those particular landfills.
How much at risk are we of a West Coast scenario if there were a sudden storm or king tide, coming in concert with foul weather, bad winds, etc.?
I mean, I get there is a risk there. We are monitoring it, like our parks team go out there regularly, and if there is anything exposed, they will make sure that that is cleaned up. And it seems to be largely just steel items, things like that, that we're seeing coming out of there on occasion at the moment. And also there are the landowners along the golf course area also managing another landfill there, where they are just monitoring and doing any cleanups of that area. But at the moment, there is definitely a risk there, but it is being monitored.
And we keep an eye on it too, Mr. Chairman, us
Well,
North
there
Ward
might be some-
councillors.
Yeah, there might be some useful vintage car parts coming
Could
out
be.
of the ground there. Right. Councillor Clinton-Gotis.
Thank you, Chair. So the scoping of the landfill and the resource consent that you're seeking, is that just for Batterscombe Terrace or for the other 2 landfills as
Just
well?
for all 3. 'Cause,
All 3, okay.
One of them's very small and is likely to be easily removed because it's more farm plastics. The other two, we do definitely need to check the extent of them just to make sure that it would be feasible to dig them out completely, or whether a partial removal would be more feasible.
Okay, and then after that investigation's done, what's the next step after that? You know, bring
Yeah,
the
so
business
that
case
we
back
would
or-
also be costing erosion protection if we had to leave reinstatement and or erosion protection to make sure that, you know, we're not exposing anything else.
Okay.
Early days, I know, but do we have a ballpark figure of what might be expended to remove the rubbish?
I don't think we do for removal. I think we have had some estimates for erosion protection, probably around the $400,000 mark.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Anything further? Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. I know that dump pretty well. I used to dump quite a lot of stuff down there. My thoughts are that if that site needed to be totally cleared, you're talking millions. So my question is, with only 500,000 in the budget, nothing in the further long-term plan, where will that impact on the walkway which goes beside it?
I'm not sure of the route of the walkway along that piece.
Bascom Terrace, yeah.
Yeah, I guess we would just have to consider that within that project. Definitely.
Anything further on that? Right. Anything you'd like to add on the Junction permanent building at last? Yay. That's good. Councillor Carlson, you've been extremely patient waiting for the Central City strategy. I think that was what you wanted to ask your questions on. Welcome back.
Hey, yeah, thanks. It was really just an update in regards to some of the investors and some of the neighbouring property owners, that whether there has been any change in regard to that, or whether that is still tracking on as per what we already know.
Okay.
Not quite sure what the question is.
Just is there any update in regards to the CBD strategy in regards to sort of property owners and anything to do with collaborations and that, or is everything just as normal?
Nothing confirmed at this stage, Councillor Carlson. I mean, we continue to get the odd inquiry or approach from property owners and developers in the city about, you know, various buildings and sites, but there's at this stage it's only kind of early discussion. There's nothing in the mix that we can substantively report on here today.
Okay, so all as per usual.
Yes.
Cool, thanks.
Councillor Clinton Godas.
Thank you. So we, in the long-term plan, we had 10 or $11 million, I believe, later on down the track in year 5 or year 6 or something. But we also put aside 1.67 for accelerating some of that when we were having discussions around parking, I believe. Is there any planning going forward, like options analysis, I guess, for how some of those funds might be used to accelerate some work before year 6?
Through you, the chair. So yeah, there's the operational funding that's been put through that parking decision. And yes, that's definitely assisting with that planning work to determine priorities and do some business case work. So we're currently, I think it's in the last line there, that we're actually looking quite closely at the moment on how we advance those different work streams and delivery mechanisms. So that money will, that'll help prioritise where that funding will go. But I have identified also one of the first areas that we are looking at, which is the Devon Street Green Master Plan.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor Chong.
Yes, I've been informed firsthand of a major developer that is not really interested in doing his grand design for the CBD development area. Are we concerned about that, and how are we going to budget if that story is true? Because I've heard it firsthand as well as another councillor. How are we adjusting our plans based on that information.
Well, firstly, there's planning work to do over a lot of the key moves, and that's where our focus is at present. So for example, the Huatoki Corridor Master Plan will be one of those areas that we are looking at over this next financial year to start understanding what the outcomes are that we're seeking and the cost of those.
Because secondary to that, I personally think it's a major blow that we need to consider sooner rather than later.
Okay, further questions? Can I ask about? Oh, sorry, Councillor Jordan, Acting Mayor.
When the master plan is delivered later this year, will we get a rough idea of what the appearance of the CBD will look like at that stage? Will there be like a glorified brochure?
Yes, there
Prospectus.
There will be a master plan, so it will show the outcomes that you'll get from the recommendations, and there'll be visuals on that. Yes.
Okay. Could I ask an associated question, which may or may not be prepared for, Juliet? Is that downtown parking building, do we have any updates or any progress on that?
Chair, so we're just progressing with the consultant for the detailed design, and we're also progressing with the works contractor as well.
So things are moving along nicely. Great, thank you. Rightio. Anything further? In order then, Kawerau to Belt Road. I asked a question a little while back on that in terms of the rail assets alongside it. Are we approaching or in discussion with KiwiRail as to whether or not they may be prepared, given that it's a fairly important railway line, to put up some funding, because at the moment it looks like we're carrying the cost.
To apologise, I didn't actually investigate that when you asked it the other day, so I will have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jordan, asked and answered. Yes. Right. Anything further? Oh, Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. Can you tell me if the council have a policy in regard to these coastal erosion strips? Because there seems to be, and with all due respect, that we've had a couple already done in New Plymouth and a couple more, but as we go north, it's managed retreat. We're not doing anything. Is there an actual policy that says what we're going to do? Because we've got residential dwellings, beautiful beaches, and so forth, where as recently as yesterday, we were told by our mayor that no, we won't, we'll be doing managed retreat. So I was just wondering if there was a policy.
Yes, we're guided by our coastal erosion policy, which has a clear indication that we will look to protect significant assets. But obviously there's different levels of those. So looking at obviously the CBD, that's quite an important asset to New Plymouth.
It is, yes.
So supplementary? I hear what you're saying, but there's an asset on everything in everyone's eyes. I would call Uranui Domain Beach a valuable asset, as I would call Oneiro. So I'm just wondering, does that come before council to decide, or is that an officer's decision alone?
No, there is a policy that guides decision-making on those matters.
Thank you.
Councillor Clinton goes.
Thanks, Chair. The section of the report mentions destination play is linked in with this kind of erosion protection project, and just wondering, are there any risks to destination play with the erosion happening in that area as well, and whether the work that we're doing will sufficiently protect it?
I think that's probably the whole reason why it is linking in with that, so that we make sure that we are protecting that area as well.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, anything further? Taranaki Traverse. We touched on it briefly. Anything further? Nope. Right, moving along. Tekoya. Basically, I understand it's concept discussions at this stage, if that. Juliet. We've got to get a keep fit class going on
Yeah.
here today.
Yeah, through the chair, is correct. So it's indicated here that a funding agreement's been reached with Te Kohutangi Tanga Te Atiawa in regards to them leading that concept planning piece.
So do we have any sort of timeline at this point over what might happen at Te Koia Park?
So we're looking at by the end of 2024 to have a good indication of that.
So at that stage, we should have some concept plans and
Yep, at
ideas to
least.
look at.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Sorry, don't
Thank-
go away. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wondered, who is the officer that's driving that project?
Through the chair, we've just entered into the agreement. So from MPDC's point of view, that will welcome to go through myself or Craig to find out more information around that.
Right.
Is that your question?
Just about. Yep, that'll be right. Thank you.
Okay, anything further on Te Koia? Nope, good. Climate Action Framework, we have a number of initiatives there. Can I say that I'm aware that there's been some really positive news in that, and I'm involved in a Rotary Club which has been working together with some of the projects and is very enthusiastic, so very pleased to see it. Does someone want to give us a brief outline other than what's here with us? Juliet?
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, I would just like to say, I think there's been some really significant progress made on this project now, and we can definitely start seeing the fruits of that in the community and the energy around it. And having some of those plantings actually underway and happening is really positive, and working with Rotary, for example. But just highlighting in particular now the Te Kowhai o Tāne grant, which is now out in the community, and we've had a really positive response to that. That's just been released, so it's been good to be able to spread the word on that particular proposal.
Okay, and as I understand it, in talking with actually the Te Ruriwa Agreement Working Group has, of course, membership from Ngāti Tawhirikura there, and they have been doing a tremendous job, as I have seen, in terms of the planting and also the preparing all the cuttings and the work that's been done. I think it's a win-win all around. It strikes me as a marvelous project. Would be, I reckon, really useful for councillors to have a look at that at some stage on one of our trips about the place. Okay, any further comment or questions? Nope.
Just on the wider climate action framework, so the National Emissions Reduction Plan is now landed, and I understand that we're on track to release our emissions reduction plan, our district-wide emissions reduction plan shortly. So just wondered if you could give us a brief update on that.
Yeah, correct. We are looking, we've been looking to align the timing so that we can release our local work that takes into consideration that national emissions reduction plan. So we are hoping to get that to you to the next round of the SOC committee. And then that can go for some public feedback and then come back to you later.
Just in terms of emissions, I've read in a number of missives recently about other councils that are doing significant work with solar panels on public buildings and the like, including some of the major stadia. Do we have any similar plans?
So I can say that our climate action framework is one of those key initiatives is to integrate these emission reduction issues into our business case planning. So that's really where these conversations begin. So for some of those larger projects, then that is starting to happen internally. We have an emissions and energy advisor who's able to input into that as well.
Just another point to note is that you will recall at the CCO committee that the airport alluded to the fact that they were also looking at setting up solar panels out at the airport as a solar farm. So that is something that the airport board are exploring as well.
And
Great,
you would have
thank you.
recently seen the Owakura example with the water treatment plant.
Yep.
So you'll start seeing these things and really good positive outcomes.
Yeah, some of us were asking questions about this a decade ago, so it's really nice to see we've got progress happening. And while it would be fair to say that other councils might be ahead of us, will we have a catch up? Will we sort of be a late starter but rapidly catching up?
I think we'll be a strong follower.
Good. Councillor Chong.
Yeah, just extending from this.
Yeah.
Yeah, just extending from this discussion, just with code of compliance on new builds, is there any way that we can look at, advising or part of the code of compliance is to have, say, up to a kilowatt, at least a kilowatt per 100 square meters of roof footage, or is that a government thing, or can we force that as a council?
Through the chair, it does sound to me like there is a
Yeah. Okay.
Right, the last in our pilot projects, multi-sport hub development. Who would like to handle this?
Ms. Turner.
Ms. Turner.
Myself and the CEO will happy to answer questions, and I also have Emma Krofsky, who's project manager on the project.
Right, I'm sure there'll be
Happy to
questions all
answer any
around.
questions you may have. Can I, just as a means of introducing the topic, just in addition to what's in your report, just to add that discussions are continuing with funders and partner organisations. For example, governance group representatives are presenting to the Toy Foundation Board on the 29th of June. And also at Sport New Zealand's request, you may remember recently that Raylene Castle visited the CEO of Sport New Zealand. So at Sport New Zealand's request, Minister Nash has been invited to meet with the project team and ourselves. So that's just a little further update. Happy to take any questions. And just to highlight, there is another briefing with the project director next week on Wednesday, the 1st of June.
Okay, Councillor Bennett, you've been waiting.
Thank you,
very
Chair.
patiently.
Hi, Teresa.
Kia ora.
Hey, look, there will be a question. It's just, this got highlighted last night at the Star Gym meeting that I went to around Taranaki Rugby Union and the Star Gym. And it was around some confusion between Te Parakino Active Community Hub and the Multi-Sport Hub development. So there is a little bit of confusion about the name and what it stands for. Section 71 here is quite clear for me. So my question is, do we need to refer to it as both, or can we narrow it down to the Te Parakino Active Community Hub, which I think would be helpful for the community understanding?
Yes, certainly. I mean, the project is called the Tuparakino Active Community Hub. That is not necessarily the name of any facility. But the multi-sport hub is the term that most of the community are familiar with. So I just think it's a question of trying to socialize that new name, Tuparakino, with the community, that's the name of the project that was formerly the multi-sport hub.
Cool.
But, yeah.
Just
I see that. Maybe we might need to, reaffirm that through some of the project comms, just so that people become more familiar with it, but it's not necessarily the name of the facility.
Yeah, and just supplementary to that, Chair, and I think that would be helpful for the community to understand. There's a perception that it's all about sport, which we know it's not. So I think referring to the active community hub would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Acting Mayor, Deputy Mayor Jordan.
Again, it's to do with dollars, unfortunately. So, in the budget, we had $38 million allowed for in our long-term plan. But I do note at a recent workshop that the project director indicated to us that we may have been somewhat optimistic in our calculations, or who was doing the calculations, that the ratios may be somewhat different than what we expect with that. So at what stage will we get an adjustment to that figure, or an adjustment in the scope, or any other kind of adjustment that's possible or probable?
I could, through the chair, I could see the CEO taking a breath to speak to that, so I'll leave it with him.
Through you, Chair, I'm just thinking through the process. I mean, the figure that's you adopted in the LTP is the budget. We can't unilaterally alter that now because it's been out for consultation. That's why we're reporting against it. The figure that the project director gave you at that workshop is going to be far closer to the mark in terms of the total budget cost. What this is reflecting was the MPDC input, as I recall, and they are different things. You know, it's one is a subset of the other. So it'll come back to how successful we are, as Ms. Turner has alluded to, in garnering some extra contributions from those other potential stakeholders. A huge amount of work been going on behind the scenes over the last 3 months in particular, continual meetings, discussions with potential funders. So the figure you should keep in your head is 110 million, which is what Steve Bramley told us at a recent workshop. At the moment, all that council has got in its budget is the 40 mil.
Right, Councillor Bedford.
Thank you. Just a first add on from the Deputy Mayor. We had that workshop. At what point does it come back to discuss with council? Is that briefing that you said that's coming up, is that a briefing to council? You said there's a briefing next week?
Correct, yeah.
Is that to council elected members? No, that's
Yep,
fine.
you have the invite in your calendar.
Okay, no, that's cool. Just in regard to paragraph 70, the financial model that will ensure the viability of the development and operation of the facility is currently in its third iteration. Do we get copies of those?
Through you, Chair. As it says, it's in its third iteration, so it's not necessarily finalised yet, but certainly you will get further information on that when it is finalised. But it's just working through.
I think that's really, really important, as we've heard with a lot of the things we've discussed here today. And this project hasn't started with cost overruns and price increases and so forth. That it's handy to have that information. If project managers are coming back to council and saying, look, we might want some more or whatever. So for me, like, I've enjoyed that briefing from the project manager with all the information. Was really, really valuable. I found really, really honest, but that's 2-3 weeks ago. And, you know, we've never debated anything since. So
just in terms of responding that, obviously, yes, when it's, as I said, when it's finalised, it's in its third iteration. And of course, anything regarding the budget and any changes, that will come when it's a council decision is required, any council decision is required.
Just to follow on from that, Mr. Chairman, I mean, it's a fair question, and I guess that the picture's still emerging, councillors. I mean, there are some significant decision gates that will be a decision of this council along the way. One that we've talked about regularly in this forum is the agreement with Taranaki Racing, for instance. And if I was to indulge in a bit of signalisation of risk, just to get the word of the day in there, I would say that, yeah, that is far from settled, obviously. We're still undergoing discussions and looking at various options about relocation of training, other elements of that. So that will be one of the major ones that will come back to you in the not too distant future.
I think we have a workshop next week on that, don't we?
1st of June.
Councillor
Clinton Goodis.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I guess, confirming my suspicion. Well, that if that budget changes, as has been kind of foreshadowed, and it will be a decision of council, is that decision of the kind of magnitude and scope that we'll need to consult with the community about?
I think it depends on two things really, through you, Chair. Its significance and its timing. So originally this was, you remember, classified as a year 6 project. Council brought it forward to year 4. So that has compressed the timing somewhat. We were likely to be able to address that in the next LTP, I think. There's still a lot of planning and detailed planning and cost estimating to go. So I suspect it will align quite nicely with the next LTP. If it doesn't, would it trigger an amended LTP in year 3? Then I would probably have to take a bit of advice on that. I mean, the figure that was socialised publicly leading into this LTP was about $90-something million. And it wasn't our project at the time, if you recall. So council went, yep, we like the sound of this. It was fronted by Sport T. And they came up with some, an indicative plans, and council said, yep, in principle, we like this, and here's $40 million to show our intent. Since then, of course, it's swung into an MPDC project. So that's why I'm hesitating a bit in how I answer that. We'd have to think through kind of the process elements of that. But it would either be addressed in the 2024-34 LTP, addressed in the year 3 annual plan, or an amended LTP in year 3, I suspect.
Supplementary. So why was it that it's ended up as an MPDC owned project, and was that always the plan?
I believe that was always the plan. It was the only way it was ever probably going to proceed, Councillor.
Okay. Councillor Chong and then Councillor Bubbles.
Yes, it's interesting. I was biting at the bit to release what we heard at the workshop of potential overruns and costs, but I couldn't. We were told that would be around June, but the CEO, you mentioned the figure of 110. So I guess that's public knowledge now. However, that's not all of it. And when is the figures of maybe things being missed out or things not being added on? When will that become public together with the amount? Is it still around June?
Through you, Chair, I doubt it will be that early, Councillor. I mean, when you say things missed out, I mean, the difference between the 90-something that was socialised with the public and where we are now is around inflation and around some of those elements that have been picked up with far more detailed cost estimating. So I can't answer that at this stage, whether that'll be a final cost. You only really find that out when you go to market for construction. So at this stage, it's the best information we have.
So is it going to be for, we don't want this to be an election issue, but we really need to know things before then. So is it going to sort of July or August, or? Must have
I'll have to talk to the project director and come back to you on that, Mr. Chair.
You'll be able to make it up anyway, Murray.
Oh, no. I won't make it.
Councillor Bubbles.
I'll go offline. I've just got a query, but I'll go offline.
That's fine. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Turner, just to excuse me, clarify the significance of your statement before when you said the council's contribution is and was and still is kept at 40 million. The cost of the entire project may have gone up as an estimate at this stage, but there is no demand request to the council for any more funding, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. It's important.
And if I may add that the funding stream, work stream that's underway is about, as the CEO referred to, is about getting others to invest. As we describe it, it's a co-design, co-invest and co-deliver project.
Well said.
Deputy Mayor.
Just a
Excellent.
supplementary for that.
Oh, hang on.
Just-
Councillor
Can you
Johnson.
just clear that again? So if a conglomerate came back to the district council and asked them for funding from us, that could happen?
I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, councillor. So what councillor Brown in summary said, the council funded budget is as set out in this report.
Yes.
The total cost of the project originally, what that was socialised with the community was 90 million.
Yep.
So we were never funding the whole project. Now, the costing of the whole project, the project director has indicated, has increased. So, but council's contribution is still sitting at where that is. And the project director has been tasked with looking at other funding streams. And that's very much part a work stream that's underway at the moment. Does that help, councillor? I'm not seeing that.
Yeah.
I've made that
talk to you
clear.
afterwards. Yep, no, that's okay.
Okay.
Deputy
Thank
Mayor
you.
Jordan.
So with that, and it's a supplementary to the question of councillor Brown. But I understood that I heard from the project director say that in normal circumstances that the project funder, such as ourselves in this case, would normally fund 2/3 of the project, and then we would the normal project, the 1/3 of the project would be funding would be found from somewhere else. Whereas in our instance, we are funding 1/3 and are expecting to outsource 2/3. So if we take, if my recollection is correct, if we take the project director words at face value, that means that instead of funding the 38 million, possibly we should have been funding closer to 80.
Through the chair, I'm not sure whether I can add anything more to that, but yes, the project director, when the project director came on board and picked up the project with the costing that had originally been developed through the work that Sport Taranaki had done, identified that the funding model was not necessarily consistent with other funding models for this type of project. So the question is how to fill the funding gap. And so first off, as I said, this is a co-design, co-invest and co-deliver project. We're looking for partners to support that funding gap.
Okay, this is a major and very important project, which councillors have a lot of interest in, but there appear to be no more questions.
Happy to take any other questions offline. I think a couple of councillors have indicated they
Thank
wanted
you.
to.
Kimberly, could we return to you for a moment? Yeah, just in our list of major projects, is there anything that we should be looking at which has strategic importance, which isn't on our current list?
Actually, that's a good question. It would be quite good to get some guidance from you if there are some projects that you think meet that criteria of strategic projects that you think we should be including.
May well be councillors who have ideas on this. If they could either come to me or to Kimberly to put them in the mix for future meetings. And perhaps you and I might have a discussion about what we might do some deep dives into going forward.
Drop some off as well, Mr. Chairman.
We could well, as time goes on, there may be projects that are not strategically important that we have dealt with sufficiently to go finished. Okay, we have a resolution that we, having considered all the matters raised in the report be noted. Do I have a mover? We do. Councillor Bedford and Councillor Bublitz, seconded. Any debate, discussion? Those in favour say aye. Aye. Oh, we do.
You're a little quick, Mr. Chair, so.
You got to mark them later on.
It was worth trying. Councillor Jordan, where you go.
Okay. I suppose I should admit that I'm pale, I'm stale, and I'm male, and I'm probably a grumpy old man.
I'm with you, Richard.
Yep.
What you, point of clarification, you agree that he is, or that you?
I think most of us would agree that he is.
But
We're very supportive, Councillor.
But I found today extremely frustrating. Mainly because that this is the Strategic Projects Committee. And yet we don't have a full understanding about how those projects are progressing against our budgets. So we got nothing to measure against. The one that frustrates me the most is the wellness hub. So the hub, the sports hub. Originally, back probably 15 years ago when the sports hub was envisaged, and the main driver at that time was netball. So because we had a overcrowded, poorly placed sports facility, which was going to be aligned with supposedly our sports hub, our future sports hub. What we have now, and I'll give you an example. So you go out and you want to buy a car, and the brochure they give you is a Rolls Royce. When they deliver it, they deliver you a Mini, because you've delivered what they said they were going to do, deliver you a car, but they've changed the scope, or the scope has been changed to fit the budget. So that frustrates me at the moment, because what I look for when I see in the future is that netball is not included, which is the mainly women's sport, mainly, not so much nowadays, but mainly women's sport or female sport, which was going to be included in the hub, is no longer there. So what are we getting? Are we been delivered the Mini? We've still got the price. We've got everything else, but we've been delivered the Mini. So I know the argument would be that when we first looked at it last year, we didn't have netball in it. Okay, no, we didn't, but we did the pretty pictures that we had in our minds from 15 years ago and been further advanced down through the years, did have netball in it, and a number of other things. So that's one of the frustrations I had. The other frustrations that you probably had, and I thought maybe I'm being pedantic, maybe I'm just a grumpy old man. I don't know, but it does frustrate me, and I believe it should frustrate the rest of you when you're looking at budgets. That you actually, when you do a budget and you understand what the project is, when the project is actually being developed and delivered, that you actually can recognise at what stage and what you are giving up to achieve that, and whether you're giving up too much. That's when the final thing, you don't want it anymore, because it's actually not the pretty picture that you're after. And the other one, there's about 4 projects that are really frustrating me. The Kaitaki Trail really frustrates me. We have $3.5 million promised by TRC for what was going to be one of the great draw cards for our province. With Taranaki, with the leisure centre of New Zealand, and now we can't do it. So we can't do it, and it can't proceed, and it's under red now. And the funding will be gone, because TRC, what they were funding, they're not getting, so they're not going to fund it. We have a hub which will not be a sports hub, as we probably envisage, so we should look carefully at that. We have a Taranaki Waitara extension of the walkway, which is under increasing pressure, and that's been looked at as a continuation of our coastal walkway. The importance of that coastal walkway, anybody can see that. We've had it for 20 years now. It is absolutely fantastic. To extend it has been in our minds for 20 odd years. That's become increasingly difficult. So what you get, what you ask for and what you get, the difference, I think, is sometimes you're going to have close look at. So I don't know. Am I a grumpy old man? I don't vote on that, because you'll say yes. But I think you've got to be really careful about what you ask for, what you get, what you think you're getting, and what you're paying for. because it's not you paying for it, it's your grandkids.
Well done.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I know it's a little bit unusual, but Teresa, you want to make a comment?
Through the chair, yeah, and this is not about the grumpy old man.
That's a given. So just moving along.
Just a point of clarification around netball. Netball is considered as part of the multi-sport hub. The requirement for netball is for indoor space and indoor courts. And so they are included in the multi-sport hub. I just wanted to clarify that for everybody.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Turner.
Soon you're allowed a council officer to make a comment. I will also climb back in. So in the original, if you
get
go
a
back
right
to
of reply,
15 years ago,
You do
Mr.
get a
Chair,
right of reply.
well, you allowed a council officer to take
Yeah,
part
yeah,
in
no,
the debate.
no,
So
no, carry on.
I'm presuming something and taking upon myself there. We did have netball courts, external net
Yes,
out
yes, we
courts out
did.
there. As you will realise,
I do.
for the colour of your hair, I can tell you, some gentleman over here to my left will recognise that in the pretty brochures that we had a few years ago, there was netball courts plastered all over around the stadium area.
Okay, thank you. We have Councillor Brown.
Thank you. In terms of the Deputy Mayor stroke Acting Mayor's comments, it's really a bit early for this debate, and next week when Steve Bramley comes back, all those questions are absolutely appropriate. But I'll just make the point, because I have an involvement in the sport, Taranaki, as you know, there's been a lot of discussions with netball, and as Teresa said, they are still in it. The reality is, since they came to here, this room, and asked for and wanted to be part of a multi-sports hub at the racecourse, TSB Stadium, they actually got a lot of funding from TSB and redid their courts, bought the facility of the club room beside it, have exclusive use of it, and they want to get the mileage out of that investment. Netball put in plenty as well. So the timing of when they come is as much in their hands as it is. Don't shake your head. Just be polite. Try it for once. And
Take your own advice.
no, mate, you're just a distraction.
Order, carry on.
Well, if you allow that to happen, just tell them to pull it in. So the reality is, look back in the long-term plan and what we voted on. It said, and I quote in the Mayor's recommendation, this is a multi-purpose hub. It is bigger than sport. There was more. The Mayor actually included those words in his recommendation and also said, have a look and included Dion Tutor's submission to envelop the concept that he actually suggested at the same time. And that is probably the most appropriate description of where we're at. It's a multi-purpose hub, which will have a lot of sport, will have a lot of netball, and don't forget, it's a stage development, and the requirements of netball to have everything indoor will come, but it will be at a time that's mutually beneficial to the sport and to the multi-purpose hub. I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really, I share your frustration, Deputy Mayor, and listen to what Gordon Brown said, our councillor here. Councillor Brown said, look back into the LTP and what we voted on. He's dead right. We did a lot of work on that. It was the hardest long-term plan that I've worked on since I've been in council. And it was a fantastic voyage. We got there, we sailed all the way, we got there, and we knew where we were going. We knew where that ship was going. But then, since that long-term plan, as you know, I've shared my frustrations with all of you with the emails that I've sent out about the Waitara Walkway. And now it's really, I thought I was on a high until I heard the Chief Executive say, that it's going to stay in yellow. So I will be seeking a clarification from the chief executive of what he exactly meant by that, because it looks like I've still got to stand up and thump the table again for our project. You know, I've met with council officers and everything since I asked to meet with them, and I was really impressed with what they brought to the table and what they told me was happening. The greatest thing that I found out was, and as they say here now, that they've got the actual detailed plan of where it's going. But the great thing that I found out from that meeting that I had with those officers was the work that the 4 Hapu and Te Ātiawa iwi have done on that, and it's taken them on a ride with us. So it's fantastic, because when you look at what they're talking about, it will be an outstanding and very exciting walkway, pathway. And if you think about it, it's the well-being of our community that we're doing that for. The frustration that came out about the hub is dead right, because that's a well-being as well. But remember, at the long-term plan, this walkway was all set and it was going places. But I just hope that it's not too far away, because everybody wants it. We've got to make it. So keep it going. So I will be talking to the chief executive after this meeting just to get a clarification on that. But when you look at the report there, it is telling us that everything's going. So I can't see why that yellow is still there. So just think about it. We've done all that work. We've got to make sure that it goes. Thank you. Sorry to take so long.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. We've got Councillor Clinton Godas, Councillor Pearce and Councillor Handley on my list. Is there anyone I've missed? Councillor Clinton Godas.
Thank you, Chair. First, I just want to assure the acting mayor that I believe that the strength of our council is in the diversity around this table, which includes those who are longer in the tooth and perhaps grumpier because of it. But I also personally have moments of being a grumpy young-ish woman, and I hope that you still love me anyway. And actually, I think that the acting mayor has raised a really good point in the reporting to this meeting, and I'm glad to hear that the team are working on the best way to structure these reports, because I do think that there's some pieces missing around the information that we get to be able to understand and really monitor appropriately the progress of the projects. And I understand that balance between getting the work done and reporting on what's being done, but I'm not sure that we're quite there yet. So I look forward to some further work in that area so that we can be assured that the projects are progressing as we hope, or to inform us that they're not.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce. Murray, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I agree and endorse the Deputy Mayor's comments about the 3 projects that I'm particularly interested in. The Kaitaki Trail, I would sincerely hope that this is not dead in the water, because we haven't been able to work with hapus. This has the ability to bring enormous funds into our district through tourism. You only have to look at what's happening in Rotorua and the thousands, hundreds of thousands that go to Rotorua to cycle the trails there. And so I sincerely hope we're not going to lose the 3.5 million. With regards to the multi-sports hub, I have some real concerns. This was driven initially by netball and then subsequently by indoor basketball and other sports. There was 10 million in this budget for netball. Netball aren't going to be there for 10 years now. And so I'm really concerned that that 10 million that was in the budget for netball will now be used for other purposes. And I'll be really interested. I'll save my comments for the workshop that's coming up. The walkway project, I agree. I think we definitely need to see on these, we need to see some graph that how much money has been spent on these projects. Where are we at? If we were a public company, we would expect to see that, that progress report illustrated financially, and it's not. And so I look forward to seeing the next update on the strategic projects with a graph showing how much money has been spent on them and where are we at. So I'll leave my multi-sports hub comments for the workshop, but I definitely endorse the Deputy Mayor's comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Even though I'm old and grumpy.
There'll be a whole lot of us in that camp. Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Handley.
Well, thank you. I'm not grumpy. In fact, I'm pretty positive. This council is undertaking some very significant projects, and I've no doubt from what I've heard today that our staff are managing these as best they can within the environment within which we work. I particularly want to say something about Tupara Kiro. Is that right? I have to get used to that. We do need to socialize it too. As a lad, I grew up in Wanganui, and I can remember when the Springvale Sports Hub was developed. It was a huge undertaking for little Wanganui. That's only half our size for sure. They got on with the job and they worked really hard. And each time I pass Springvale and I look over and I see their hub and I see all their sports gear and all their equipment, I think, damn it, if they can do it, we can do this. It's a huge undertaking, I have no doubt, and it's going to take some years, and it's going to be a real challenge to get done. But I have no doubt that the walkway and the other major projects can and will be completed. And next year on, I'll be watching really closely. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's keep going. Let's not be grumpy. Let's not be negative. Let's just allow the staff to get on as hard as they're working and as best they can to get these jolly things done.
Any further contributions? You want another one? Right of reply.
Sorry.
Oh, of course. Councillor Beaver, did you want to?
I was just going to say, if we're closing the meeting, do we need another resolution? Start another meeting.
Not that I'm
Got
worried.
right reply there, Gary. Okay.
We need to pass this resolution. Any further contributions? Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We now have a closing karakia.
Ki te uru tapanui. Ki o Mātia, ki o Mama, Tinako, Te Tinana, Ti Wairua, Te Ara Takati. Koira I rongo whakaurihia a ki runga, ki o Mātia, ki o Mātia, ai kūwātia, haupapa.
Right, thank you, everyone. Yeah, the break's a good idea.
We have a workshop now. No, we got a
Yeah,
workshop.
yeah.